Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We have a good program today. We're going to talk about contactless technologies in the QSR and fast food restaurants. So I would like to welcome all of you and thanks for joining us and taking the time to be a part of this today. I want to go through a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We're going to use the chat function for questions. So if you have questions as we're talking, then please put them in the chat function and we'll get to those at the end of our time. We'll have a short Q&A session. So with that, I want to welcome Jeff Toke from Compaction Technologies. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. And I'm going to turn it over to you. So
okay,
take it away.
Thanks, Stacy. All right, can you see everything okay there?
You see the your working screen.
Okay, let's change that then. How about now?
That's perfect.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Stacy, and again, thanks to everybody who chose to join us today. My name is Jeff Toke. I'm CEO of Compaction Technologies based here in Eagan, Minnesota. Today's webinar is really a byproduct of the uncertainty surrounding COVID-19 as it relates to our business. Back when I first heard about COVID-19, like many of you, I wondered, what the impact would be on our business. You see, we provide trash compactors for dining rooms and restrooms in public spaces. And our largest segment is quick service and fast casual restaurants. And with the idea that they could close their dining rooms, it made me wonder about our future. I mean, we all hear the stories about the liquor distillery that converted their production lines from making vodka to making hand sanitizer. And we hear about the clothing companies that moved from producing pants and shirts to manufacturing PPE. And I was wondering if this might mean that, we needed to shift gears. In April and into early May, when the first articles started appearing about reopening restaurants with COVID-19, there were several mentions of contactless technology, contactless payment systems, contactless paper towel dispensers, and contactless hand sanitizer stations. They kind of were at the top of the list. And one of my team members sent me one of these articles and she asked, well, how come they don't mention contactless trash deposits? I started to reply to her email and I thought, that's a really good question. I mean, we're in 1,000 Chick-fil-A locations and they seem to love what we're doing. And we've been providing hands-free trash deposits for 10 years. But the realities are, even with being in 1,000 Chick-fil-A's, a couple hundred hospitals, airports, colleges, shopping malls, and business campuses, our category is still not widely known. There are 250,000 quick serve and fast casual restaurant locations around the country, so we're in less than 0.5%. We're basically off the radar. It occurred to me that we could either wait for somebody to do a study and mention us, or we could do it ourselves. In addition to that, we wanted to find out what guests thought about contactless trash cans relative to what they thought about other common items that they find in quick serve restaurants. Now, I contacted the firm that did some really good strategy work for us a few years ago and asked them the question. I've read tons of market research reports, but I'm not an expert in fielding a study. So I wanted the results, whatever they were, to be credible and withstand scrutiny if somebody were to ask questions. So we went through Axiom Communications, who do this type of research all the time. And we surveyed in markets where front of house trash compaction had pretty good penetration for at least the last 1 to 2 years. That way, if a consumer is asking a survey, they would know more about it than just what they read on the survey form. So that's why today's webinar. We had completed this survey, we analyzed the data, we got our questions answered, but there were some really interesting insights from this information, and we just, we used a lot of references and we thought, well, this might be useful to some other people. So we wanted to share what we learned with you at no cost in hopes that it helps you make good operating decisions going forward. So let's start kind of from before COVID-19 was a big deal, and let's just kind of walk through to where we are today. And I think it's important to keep in mind the sort of the state of the industry in early Q1 of 2020 as we look at this whole thing. At the beginning of all this, automation was surging, primarily because the US economy was booming and unemployment was at the lowest rates we'd seen in 20 years. Third-party delivery was also really taken off. Now, technology companies, they were investing very heavily in, marketing, new products, particularly the folks that build kiosks or remote ordering systems or delivery. I mean, every convention or meeting or seminar I went to over the last 2 years was just overrun with contactless payment system companies, self-order kiosk companies, DoorDash, Uber Eats, and about 6 other delivery companies. Now, in our little category of front of house trash compactors, Chick-fil-A was the first national brand to authorize this for any of their operators. And it really got started in 2017, and it doubled in 2018, and it doubled again in 2019. And my competitors and I, we were investing pretty heavily in marketing and new product development. In fact, a new competitor got into the category. So by February of 2020, the category was on pace to double again for the 3rd year in a row. Well, then it all changed. For the state of Minnesota, it was March 16th, the day before St. Patrick's Day. Now, normally St. Patrick's Day in St. Paul, Minnesota is as crazy as it gets anywhere in the country. But when our governor went on TV and closed the bars and restaurants, I think everybody stepped back and said, wow, this COVID thing is really serious. Well, you all know the story from there. Since then, COVID-19 has really wreaked havoc on what had been a booming industry. And for the restaurants and the bars, without a drive-through or with only a small carry-out business, my heart really goes out to them. A lot of those folks won't make it back. Now, for most quick serve restaurants and fast casual restaurants, at least they have a thriving drive-through business to keep their operations going. And they'd had 3 years of practice to perfect third-party delivery. So they're hanging in there until we can come back to some sense of normal. Now, again, in early April, when the articles and studies began to appear about how to reopen your restaurant, the recommendations for contactless technology first started. But again, there was no mention of front of house trash compaction, probably because it was such a small category. And really the question in our minds at the time was, do we stay the course or do we pivot? Do we pivot away from quick serve and fast casual and pivot towards, say, healthcare or convenience stores or residential? I mean, the options were daunting. In my gut and in my partner's gut, we both felt that we would be as strong a fit as ever, maybe even a stronger fit when we came out of this. But we didn't want to bet the company on our gut instinct. That's when we decided to do some research to reduce our risk. So we commissioned this study. We wanted to know how consumers felt about front of house trash compactors relative to other common items. So we worked with Axiom to come up with a relevant set of items to compare to. Now, some of these items that we compared to are there purely as benchmarks. I mean, we talk about self-order kiosks and table markers. They're just there as benchmarks. We don't compare anything to them. And others are there to see how they compare to alternatives. So by mid-April, more articles and surveys are coming out about how restaurants should reopen, and a common theme was starting to emerge. I mean, the articles tell us that contactless is the rage. I mean, they don't talk about trash, but they talk about contactless everything else. And we started asking our customers about trash, about how they plan to do that, and they do the palm to the forehead and go, oh yeah, I didn't think that far ahead. And to me, actually, that's not a huge surprise, because we've been promoting better dining room sanitation for the last 10 years. And I can tell you, it's not something that clients thought about too much. In fact, I think a lot of the industry would acknowledge that dining room trash is a problem, and they're not doing as well with it as they could. But guests seemed to have tolerated it. Now, you've all seen poor trash handling practices in quick serve and fast casual. Towards the end of a shift or the end of a lunch rush, trash starts to pile up and it starts to come out of the top of the trash cans, and guests either have to leave their full trays on their table, or they have to actually go in and smash down somebody else's trash with their hands to make room for theirs. Now, I don't completely blame operators. If guests tolerate it, why shouldn't an operator worry about it? I mean, after all, if the mindset was if it only happens during the peak times, maybe 2-3 times a day, It's not the end of the world if a table doesn't get cleaned, right? Or doesn't get wiped down or trash overflows. No big deal. Well, my friends, I think COVID-19 has changed consumer numbness to poor trash handling in the dining room forever. I mean, guests may have unconsciously accepted it, but no more. They are no longer numb to it. And how the industry handles it will probably dictate how quickly dining room traffic rebounds. And I think it's for the QSR operators in the audience to consider what their strategies might be to respond to COVID-19. And you have a range of strategy choices. So what are you going to do about it? You have options. Now, some are better than others. There are rules now from the CDC, from states, and from local authorities about how you should operate. That means you'll need to change how you do business when the law requires more cleaning. So how do you get that additional cleaning done? Well, one option is to just quit, close your doors and not bother with it. And I think we all have examples of restaurants that have done that for one reason or another. Now, for those of you that plan on staying in business and coming out of this thing on the other side, another option is to do nothing. And by that, I mean, go back to what you were doing before. Empty the trash cans on a regular schedule or when they overfill, and don't worry about the occasional dining room trash on the floor. I mean, that's certainly an option, but I think there are better choices. Now, I can't predict anything with 100% certainty of what's going to happen, but I think you'll agree returning to business as usual as we knew it before is a mistake. Why? Well, you all know what happened at Chipotle when they were linked to E. coli outbreaks. Remember that? People got sick, the USDA, the FDA, state and local health departments got involved, and Chipotle took a beating in the press. Now, if you truly do nothing and go back to business as usual, you run the risk of being a source for spreading COVID-19, and people could get sick, or even, God forbid, people could die. Now, not only does that give the industry a black eye, you have invited upon yourself the wrath of the USDA, the FDA, state and local health departments, the press, plus about 1,000 personal injury attorneys that are just foaming at the mouth to make a wrongful death lawsuit because some restaurant didn't follow CDC guidelines. Now, I might be alone in this thought, but I think the industry would be better off if operators that plan to do nothing would just close their doors. Another option is to apply more human resources to do the additional cleaning and sanitation work. That means more time spent cleaning. So that means either more people or the same people with more hours. Now, before COVID-19, low unemployment made adding people a real challenge. And I still see plenty of now hiring signs in quick service and fast casual restaurants, which tells me it's still hard to find good people that want to work. Another option is to de-emphasize dine-in, or take that to the extreme and close the dining room. And you know, I've talked to several operators, and they have been reduced to drive-through and carry-out, and they mention kind of how they like avoiding the chaos in the dining room. And you know, if that works for you, you should consider it. But I think it's fair to say that dine-in gives you, the operator, the very best opportunity to showcase your brand and give your guests the best brand experience possible. And besides, French fries and other foods taste the best right out of your kitchen. And even if you do close your dining room, you're still going to have your restrooms and your service counter and your waiting area open, so they're going to need to be cleaned. So that may not resolve all your cleaning problems. And another option that we can't forget about is the option to automate and deploy contactless technologies. And you know about contactless payment systems and paper towel dispensers and automatic doors, but trash handling is another technology that can be automated and save yourself a lot of hassle handling waste that is kind of nasty waste. It's touched people's hands, mouths, and noses. So waste handling automation is definitely a good option. So before I got to today's survey results, I just kind of wanted to rehash the state of the industry and some strategies for how you might address COVID-19. They're relevant topics for the listeners today. So I've done that now, so let's talk about the survey. So what automated technologies do guests want to see? Well, we asked consumers about 8 items, and some were for benchmarks and some were for comparison. And we kind of followed the guest visit through a quick serve restaurant. So you enter and you place your order, and you go to self-service kiosks. That's where you ask about those. Then you pay for your order, where we asked about contactless payment systems. Then you get your food, where we talked about table markers. And then we talked about the end of the visit, where you would deposit your trash, usually in a trash can or in a contactless front of house compactor. We also talked about technologies found in the restrooms. First, about air dryers. This survey was done late April to early May of 2020, and we've noticed since then that air dryers are really being taken a beating in the press. And I think as that message continues to get widespread, consumers may view air dryers a little bit differently, but for now, this is the, you'll see the scores of what people thought of it at that time. We then asked about 2 more technologies in restrooms, paper towels as really a comparative to air dryers, and we used a traditional method of disposal. And then finally, we asked about paper towels and a new technology for capturing and disposing. So again, we tried to follow the visit kind of from start to finish. Then we asked about restroom technology. Research parameters, pretty straightforward. We conducted this study late April and early May. It was done primarily online with very cell phone friendly technology. We had 500 survey people, and they had all eaten in quick serve or fast casuals over the last couple of weeks. And in addition to naming the technology, we also gave them a photo and a description. Now, when Axiom proposed this survey format to me, it reminded me of a new product concept screen, which I had done several times in my brand management days at Kraft Foods in Pillsbury. And the discipline at Kraft in particular was to really understand the positive scores, but also pay attention to the negative scores. And ideally, if you're screening new products, you want to have a high positive and a low negative. But if your high positive scores are high enough, you may not care so much about your negative scores. It just means there's some users you're not likely to get. But we were shooting for in this a balance of males and females, which we achieved. And we only talked to people over 19, and then we split the group between 19 to 54 and then 54 and older. So with that, let's go ahead and get to the first question. First question was, how interested are you in using self-order kiosks on your next fast food dine-in visit? Now, self-order kiosks were used primarily as a well-established benchmark. And when doing this type of work, you need benchmarks because, you know, attaching a preference score to only one technology would be kind of pointless. So self-order kiosks, they're established, they're accepted technology that the general public's familiar with, and they serve as a good benchmark. And as you can see, self-order kiosks scored pretty well, with 58.4% of the respondents definitely interested or interested in using them. And that's a 2-to-1 preference over those that were not interested or definitely not interested. The next question we asked was, how interested are you in using contactless payment systems on your next fast food dine-in visit? Now, contactless payment systems were on the rise prior to COVID-19, and based on these results, they'll continue to see strong interest, with 71% of the respondents definitely interested or interested. I mean, if this were truly a new product screening survey, this concept would be a high potential, low risk opportunity. 70% liked it and only 13% were on the negative side. That's a solid score. That's one that most any product manager would be happy with. The next question we ask, how concerned are you about handling table markers on your next fast food dine-in visit? Now, like self-order kiosks, this was really more of a benchmarking item. And on the surface, as you look at this, these results, it looks something like a bell curve, but nearly half of the respondents were concerned or definitely concerned. And this is definitely a riskier proposition than self-order kiosks. And prior to the survey, I was anticipating that this particular table markers would be high risk. And I was actually a little surprised at how unconcerned respondents were. Our next question, how concerned are you about using trash cans on your next fast food dine-in visit? Now, like the previous item, table markers, trash cans has a bell-shaped curve to it, and more respondents were concerned than those not concerned. And I think it's important to look at this in context. Trash cans have been around since the dawn of time, and quick serve guests are neutral to them, particularly when they don't know any better or don't know of alternatives. Our next question was, how interested are you in using hands-free trash compactors on your next fast food dine-in visit? Now, these results surprised even me. I mean, I thought the category would finish with stronger marks than trash cans, but I had no idea it would be this pronounced. Over 75% of the respondents were definitely interested or interested. And I also thought it was nice that very few respondents had concerns, less than 7%. This type of score on a new product concept screen, this is a new product manager's dream. I mean, most of the respondents gave it their top box, and very, very few people were scared of it. And I think this confirms the feedback that we routinely get from our customers, their employees, and their guests. Okay, turning now from the dining room to the restroom, next question we asked was, how appealing is using an air dryer in the restroom on your next fast food dine-in visit? Now, like table markers, this one surprised me by scoring as well as it did. I would have guessed that respondents would have been afraid of air dryers, but according to this, they're not so much. But again, we're interested in the relative comparisons, so I think the next item will provide an alternative to air dryers and tell you a lot. So the next question was, how interested are you in using paper towels and built-in trash cans in the restroom on your next fast food dine-in visit? This one didn't surprise me, but I'm biased because I don't really care for air dryers. But when using paper towels as a baseline compared to air dryers, paper towels are the clear preference between the two. Paper towels saw a top box score of 70% compared to only less than 60% for air dryers. And I also look at the relatively low not interested or definitely not interested score for paper towels at 8%. That's a really small group to alienate. And compared to air dryers, where 25% were in the bottom two boxes, that shows me there's a clear preference for paper towels. And in this one, we mentioned the disposal method because we wanted to get a benchmark on the next item. And the next question was, how interested are you in using hands-free paper towel compactors in the restroom on your next fast food dine-in visit? Now, this category has next to zero penetration, and it's largely unheard of. But it also scored the highest of all the items surveyed. 78% were definitely interested or interested. This is slightly better than the scores for contactless trash deposits. And as I've reviewed these items, I've made comparisons, and I think it might be helpful to put them all on the same scale. Now, we're going to use a scale that combines how good is the positive with how bad is the negative. Now, I didn't come up with this myself, and I don't remember the name of the scale or the person that invented it, but I remember it from business school. So on the horizontal x-axis is how good is the positive. And on the left, it's slightly positive, and on the right, it's very positive. And then on the vertical y-axis is how bad is the negative, with very negative on the bottom and slightly negative on top. Well, these two axes create four quadrants, and we can label them indifferent, and that's where the good is slightly positive and the bad is slightly negative. Now, to me, this is among the worst places you want to be because nobody cares. Indifferent, that's where the good is slightly positive and the bad is slightly negative. Oh, I'm sorry, I just read that. The next one was polarizing, and that's where good was very positive and the bad was very negative. Now, typically in this quadrant, people love it or hate it, and there's very little in between. And it also suggests there might be a strong group within your audience. Another quadrant we'll call high risk. And this is where the good is slightly positive and the bad is very negative. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then there's low risk, where the good is very positive and the bad is only slightly negative. So now let's look at each of these technologies on this grid. Our benchmarks were closest to the neutral middle. Trash cans were about equally liked and disliked. Another benchmark was table markers, and they are by far the highest risk item. And I'll leave it to somebody smarter than me to figure out what to do about that. I have to think there's an alternative someplace to table markers. One thing I noticed here is the difference between trash cans and the alternative of contactless trash cans. Now, this is not a gap. This is more of a gulf. I mean, that's a big spread. You know, but in my business, we ask prospects and their guests about this type of thing all the time, and it's very consistent with what we hear. They really like contactless trash compactors. There's also really strong marks for paper towel compactors, and I think that has to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. And I think it's directionally good, and it's really pretty close to paper towels, but it's a big gap from air dryers. And based on this, I think it's safe to say that the gap between air dryers and contactless paper towel compactors is big, and it would be much more noticeable than just going to paper towels. And this is pure judgment on my part, but paper towels can be a bit polarizing. And I think that using paper towel compactors minimizes some of that polarization of using paper towels. So that's the survey and its results in a nutshell. But before we go, I wanted to wrap up by sharing some thoughts on contactless trash compactors in the dining room and paper towel compactors in the restroom. And there's a good chance that many of you listening have never heard of these. So for front of house trash compactors, there's 4 different brands that I know of in this marketplace, and they all pretty much serve the same primary function. They compact 8 to 10 bags of loose trash into one. Now, 3 of these brands use contactless trash deposits, meaning they use a motion sensor to open the door so nobody has to touch anything. 1 brand is ETL certified, and all brands, I think, are very intuitive for guests to use. This technology delivers an 85% fewer trash bag changes, and that gives operators more time for other tasks like cleaning. They also dramatically reduce, if not eliminate, overflows so people don't have to hand compact to get trash into the container. Compacting front of house trash compactors reduces the trash volume in the dumpster, which can mean either a smaller dumpster or reduced pickups or both, but it puts, there's a cost savings there from compacting trash in the dining room. This technology saves thousands of trash bags from going to landfills. And for our largest customer, they saved over 11 million trash bags last year, and the plastic weight savings alone on that was 225 tons. So 225 tons of pure plastic did not go into landfills last year because of this technology for our biggest customer. And finally, front house compactors are very noticeable to guests. I mean, we saw this all the time when you put them in, guests notice it, particularly little kids. They love to activate the doors and they think it's pretty cool. The other one I wanted to touch on briefly was contactless paper towel compactors in restrooms. And they're relatively new, but they are very effective because paper towels are relatively easy to compact. One of our newest customers just completed a benchmarking study where they audited how many paper towel deposits they fit into paper towel compactors and then how many they fit into their regular trash bins. And 1,095 paper towel deposits in the compactors and 54 paper towel deposits in the built-in cans. So this customer is going to empty compactors once instead of 20 times. That's a 20-fold reduction on overflows, a 20-fold reduction in time spent handling restroom trash. And for this client, it's a long distance from their restrooms to their dumpster. So these units are going to pay for themselves basically in about 6 months. So today, hopefully you've learned a little bit about contactless technologies relative to one another and what your guests are interested in seeing when your restaurant reopens. I wish you all the best as you reopen. And earlier we talked about several options that you have. for how you'll change operations in the new normal with COVID-19. And I really hope you change your practices, because guests are going to want to see clean. Whatever you do, I'd like to leave you with a thought that has really stuck with me through this. It came from Doug Baker, the CEO of Ecolab, which is a pretty big name in the restaurant business. And he gave an interview and he made a quote that went something like, "We're living through history, so be proud of how we do it." And I think those are poignant words. It's really up to the operators. If you operators do a good job reopening and make guests feel safe, they'll come back in droves. Whatever you do, stay flexible, listen to your people, change where you need to. There's no playbook on how to do this. And maybe a really good idea that you passed over previously, maybe that makes more sense now. But you're resilient. If you're in the restaurant industry, you're resilient. So put your best foot forward and do well for yourselves and do well for the industry. So that concludes my comments. Thanks for your time today, and I'll be happy to take a few questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. Yeah, we do have some questions that came in, so I want to kind of organizing these here, and I want to fire them off to you. First, let's start with if someone already is using a compactor either in the kitchen or the top of the dumpster, I'm reading this off here, will it reduce my trash hauling costs anymore?
The short answer is probably no, but I think it's an interesting topic because as we have gotten into more quick serve restaurants, a lot of them already had back of house compactors. And what we're seeing is that operators don't feel they need to do both, but they are choosing front of house compaction instead of back of house compaction, because with back of house compaction, and it's got its benefits, but it requires to occupy floor space in the kitchen or in the back. If it's not on the dumpster, it occupies permanently floor space, and floor space in a kitchen is at a premium. It also requires a secondary step. So that means your team now has to take all the bags out of the dining room and run them through a compactor. Well, when you go with a front of house compactor, you have no space utilization in the back, so you can save that space, and there's no additional steps. There's also no age restrictions with a front of house compactor. So what we find is that the bulk of the fluffy trash in a restaurant comes out of the front of the house. In fact, it's about 80% of a restaurant's volume comes out of the dining room, and the 20% of the volume that comes out of the back is already really heavy. So we pretty much find that front of house compaction will give you the same results as you were getting from a hauling savings perspective with back of house. And so we find that when the term expires on leases for back of house equipment, most operators let them go. And you know, we also wondered about what would happen if somebody started with front of house compactors and then added back of house compactors. What would be the change? But we have not seen that. I can't think of one customer that we have that's added back of house compactors after they put in front of house.
So what, next question, what happens when the compactor gets full? What's the process then?
Oh, you know, I didn't talk about that, but it varies by manufacturer. I can talk about how Compaction Technologies does it with original Eco Trash. Our compactor has a monitor on the front, so it'll tell people in advance of how full it is. Think of it as a gas gauge in reverse. It'll tell you how full the machine's getting, and when it gets full, the front door will shut and lock, so no more deposits can go in it. And then it's as simple as pulling it out, because we've got a trash bin that's on wheels and has a handle on it. So the dining room attendant just needs to open the front door with a key and grab onto the handle and pull out the trash bin. And we provide all of our customers with an additional trash bin, or they buy one, and they just basically switch those out real quickly. So they can basically switch it in about 15 seconds, and the unit is never down. So you don't have to worry about guests not being able to deposit trash. But we've tried to make this really, really easy for people to use, both on the front end as guests, but also for your staff to change out.
Mm-hmm. So when you're changing that out, then another question that we have is, what does that trash weigh to pull it out of that rolly bin and put it into a dumpster?
Sure, that's a good question. It depends entirely upon the waste stream, but in a typical McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or Dairy Queen, they're going to weigh between 30 and 40 pounds. And we try to stay in that 30-pound range because that's kind of an OSHA restriction. And for example, McDonald's, their French fry boxes, they weigh 33 pounds. So we try to target that area. And again, it really depends though upon what your waste stream is like. We have some hospital customers that use a lot of styrofoam. So their trash bags, when they're compacted, maybe only weigh 20 pounds. But a good way to predict what it's going to weigh is if you calculate what a existing bag that's loose, what that weighs, multiply that by 6 or 8, and that's probably what your compacted bags are going to weigh.
Okay. How does your compactor handle liquid waste?
Oh, we get asked that a lot. So liquid is, we actually have a couple of things working for us. Probably the biggest factor is all of the paper goods that are in the waste stream. And by that, I mean the napkins and the tray liners. Those actually act to absorb a lot of the liquid. And the second thing that we do is we use a customized bag that's very thick, and it's got a very good seal on the bottom so that it's less prone to leaking. And we ask that our customers utilize that bag, and we basically sell it. We don't sell it. It goes through distribution. But that's between those two things, we really make liquid a non-issue. And we do occasionally have a leak. I mean, to build a leak-proof bag, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, submarines leak, for crying out loud. We build a bag that's very leak resistant, and in the event that you should get a leaker, and as soon as they lift it out of the bin, they can see it. So they just set it back down in the bin and just roll the bin out to the dumpster. So it's really, I think we've done a good job thinking through that and making liquid an easy thing to handle.
Okay, time for a couple more questions. First, how much electricity does a compactor use, and what type of electricity? And I think they mean what type, how does it plug into the wall?
Sure. And this varies too by brand of front of house compactor. We chose to go with the least amount of electricity that we could. So our machines use regular 120 volt power. It does not need to be on a dedicated circuit. A lot of times when people are adding power outlets, they'll just tap into the circuit that's on the lights or what's already in the wall. Our units only use about, if you look at it from a cost standpoint, they use about $8 worth of electricity per year if your electricity is at about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So they're really, really reasonable. And at the most, they only pull about 3 amps. So it's not like these things are going to be drawn down or breaking circuits or anything like that. Now, some of our competitors chose to go with a different technology. And they're using hydraulics, which they have to use a hydraulic pump, and they do require a dedicated circuit. We chose not to go that way. So we try to be as energy efficient as possible.
Okay, great. Anything else that you'd like to add, Jeff, before we close out here?
We've got compactors installed all around the country. And, if anybody listening is interested in seeing one, I can put my email address on the screen, and I think that's on there, but let me just check that quick. Well, basically, we have these things we're in about 1,000 Chick-fil-A's across the country. We're in like 200 VA hospitals, and just reach out to us at www.compactiontechnologies.com or send me an email at jtoke@compactiontechnologies.com, and where you live, and I'll send you I'll send you the nearest one to you so you can go take a look at it.
Great, good. Thanks so much. So this has been great, Jeff. Thanks for taking the time to put this together and talk today. It's been very helpful, and I'm glad we had a chance to work together on this because it was really interesting.
Well, thank you.
For everyone, yeah, you're welcome. For everyone that's listening, we will send out this presentation to. We're going to send out a reply email to those of you that are on with us today, and we'll make it available. We'll make the video available on the Compaction Technologies website as well as on the social sites. So thanks so much for being with us, and appreciate you taking your time to be here today. And Jeff, thank you too. And we hope to do something like this again in the future. So stay tuned. Thanks a lot. Bye now.